Hi and welcome to another video from the CTAD Clinic. My name is Dr. Mike Lloyd, I'm the Clinic Director, and I'm going to be talking today about the difference between diagnostic categories of dissociation. It's been really interesting looking at the feedback on the first two videos, and a number of people have asked the question, what's the difference between OSDD and DID? That means what's the difference between Other Specified Dissociative Disorder and Dissociative Identity Disorder. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, and I'm going to get into some of the prevalence results of that. So prevalence is the number of people that would have a condition in any given population. So how many people have these conditions that we're aware of. We have general population, we have psychiatric population, so I'll give you a bit of background on those. To start with DID, it's important to know what the diagnostic categories are. Under the DSM-5 criteria, which is the Diagnostical and Statistical Manual, that's the most up-to-date form we have of developing an understanding of the presence of these symptoms and signs of any condition, psychiatric condition, and we're looking at DID to start with. So DID is set out into 5 categories. The first one, it has to be a disruption of identity caused by 2 or more distinct personality states. Second one, there has to be recurrent gaps in memory, so there have to be issues of amnesia beyond ordinary forgetting. Third criteria is that the symptoms generate significant distress in functioning, so they actually get in the way of a person's life. That it's not part of a broadly accepted religious practice, and that it's not as a result of use of substances, alcohol, drugs, medication, or physical conditions such as a head injury. That's what DID is. The DSM-4, this was slightly different in that Dissociative Identity Disorder, DID, also had a subcategory called DDNOS, which was Dissociative Disorder Not Otherwise Specified. Now, what not otherwise specified meant is that it didn't actually generate the same level of diagnostic criteria that would be applicable to DID. So largely speaking, criterion A wasn't being met, that the person did dissociate, that they may well have had different identities, but they didn't take over, they weren't actually, and as it says under the criteria here, which is all part of the paperwork, characterized by 2 or more distinct personality states. So these personality states in DID can take over the functioning of the individual. In DDNOS, they could not. They would be highly influential. So we had DDNOS that would be not quite the level of DID, so that the internal parts or alters could be influential in the person's behavior and expression, but they couldn't take over the body. And there was amnesia present. There was also a different subcategory of DDNOS where the amnesia was not present. These would be known as DDNOS 1A and DDNOS 1B. I'm showing a graphic on the screen now which highlights these differences between DSM-4 and DSM-5, and you can see how in the Other Specified Dissociative Disorders, the OSDD, these are categorized into one thing, OSDD. But we tend to think of OSDD being also having a variant 1A and a variant 1B. So this comes down to whether or not there is amnesia present or whether there isn't. That's the simplest way to look at this. So we have, according to that graphic, you can see that DID under DSM-4 is still DID under DSM-5. Derealization and depersonalization have now been placed together, and there is an unspecified dissociative disorder which has unclear symptoms. So that really gives us a bit of an understanding of the different categories. So it's a really, really simple answer that OSDD is basically a less severe version of DID. The alters may well be present, but they don't come out, they don't front as such, they don't come and take over the body, but they can be highly influential, and amnesia may or may not be present. Realistically, some of what people were experiencing as DDNOS is now being translated into actual DID. The essence of this, and the best part, if there is a best part of all of this, is that it doesn't really make any difference to the treatment whether a person has DID, OSDD 1A or OSDD 1B. The actual treatment pathway and the approach to treatment and the type of therapy that a person would experience is exactly the same. So it comes down to a semantic argument about diagnosis. We want to get into the prevalence data. I'm putting another graphic up on the screen now, so hopefully you can see that. It's a little bit small, but I'm hoping it's going to be readable. So we can see that there's a breakdown between dissociative amnesia, fugue, DID, depersonalization, DDNOS, We've got Canada that have a prevalence rating of DID is 1.3%. We have New York State, USA, 1.5%, and Turkey, 1.1%. So that fits in with our general picture and understanding that in the general population, DID is kind of around that 1% category. Dissociative amnesia is higher. You've got 6, 1.8%, 7.3%. And then DDNOS is sort of 0.2% in Canada, it's 4.3% in USA, and 8.3% in Turkey. So there's a huge variation for DDNOS. So we would expect to see the same things if we were just measuring other specified dissociative disorders. Like I said, whether you get one OSDD diagnosis or whether you get DID diagnosis, though, the therapy plan is exactly the same. So we then have a second table, which I'm putting up here, so I'm hoping you can see all this stuff. This is for the psychiatric population, so these would be the people that are referred and seen within mental health services. And we've got inpatient studies there saying that the level of DID is up to, say, 5% in Canada, 4% in the USA, up to 12% in a different study in the USA. We've got Finland not showing any data, Israel 0.8%, China 0.5%, we've got Turkey 2.5% different studies. Again, we've got prevalence 16%. So there's an enormous variation in the inpatient group, or the emergency group, or the general psychiatric outpatient group, which would be expected because these are the folks that are most likely to have the most severe forms of mental health problems, so they're the ones that are going to have the highest prevalence rates. If we look at all dissociative disorders, psychiatric inpatients have prevalence rates of around anywhere between sort of 5 and 46%. In the outpatients, it's sort of around about sort of 12 to 20%. In adolescents, 45%, which is a huge amount. And in emergency settings, anything from 17 to like 40%. So again, massive variation in prevalence rates, but these are seen in different countries around the world. And there is a really important understanding about where we sit with this. I conducted some research on inpatient wards myself, following on from previous research, so it's copying other research that was done years ago and following exactly the same process. And we found in our research that about 25% of inpatients in psychiatric units were dissociating. That's a huge amount, so about a quarter of inpatients are likely to be dissociative. In the general population, it's much less. So we do have these prevalence data available to us. They are up for scrutiny and they deserve to be up for scrutiny, and it's really important that more research is done and to actually measure these things. There's a really good question posed about this on one of the channels, and I hope I answered that half decent. That's all I'm going to go through today. There's a lot more that we can talk about with this, but I just wanted to be fairly brief. Please leave any comments at the end of the channel and let me know what you think about this video, and I will keep posting more information as we go along. So thanks very much for listening, everybody, and take care.